So the wait is nearly over. The biggest test match of the year, All Blacks versus Springboks at Eden Park. And it is a very tough match to be able to predict. But in this preview, we'll be looking through at the lineups, the key players, previous results between these two sides, a few interesting stats, and then also a prediction for who I think will be able to win this match. But jumping straight into it, the All Blacks, they announced their side around midday on Thursday. Scott Robertson making a few changes compared to what we saw in the losing effort from New Zealand. Up against the Argentines in the front row, though, it is identical. Ethan Group number 1, Cody Taylor number 2, and Fletcher Null slotting in as the 3. The All Blacks scrum so far throughout this year has been pretty strong, only losing just the one scrum at this point in time. The line out, the best of the competition in the first match up against the Pumas, 100% accuracy for the ABs. It has dropped a little bit from test match number 2, but 15 lineouts won by Fabian Holland, but he does not feature in the starting lineup here. For the Kiwis instead, in the locking duo, it is Scott Barrett as the number 4 once again. We'll also have the captaincy, number 5, Tupou Vaa'i. So he has been playing in that number 6 jersey, doing brilliantly at blindside, but for this match up against the Boks, swapping him back into the locking duo. So we'll have to wait to see whether or not that same cohesion of the previous lineout is still there with that one change in the loose forward trio. This is where the All Blacks probably have made their boldest decisions of the whole lineup. Number 6, Simon Parker. Number 7, it is Ardie Savea for his 100th match in an All Blacks kit. And then number 8, they have gone with Wallace Satiti. He made his way off the bench last week up against Argentina. Looked like one of the busier players, but this Parker-Satiti combination, we've seen it at the Chiefs, but not at international level. Simon Parker, he was busy in his first match in an All Blacks kit, but now already a positional change for that man in this contest. Moving on to the backline, Finlay Christie, or as I like to call him, the last man standing. So many injuries in the halfback department. No Cam Roigard, no Cortez Ratama, no Noah Hotham, almost no Kyle Preston, but he will be having his debut off the bench. But Finlay Christie gets the chance here to partner up with Beauden Barrett in that 9 and 10 combination. Now, this is home turf for those two men playing at Eden Park throughout their Super Rugby season. Christie's received a lot of criticism, but at this point in time, that criticism has to turn into support because he will be the 9 on Saturday and he will have a huge amount of pressure on his shoulders trying to feed that All Blacks backline. He made some great decisions in the second match up against Argentina, of course, getting a lot more minutes in that game than first anticipated. But I'm very intrigued to see what Christie and Barrett can do as that 9-10 combo. Again, for the ABs in the midfield combo, it will once again be Jordie Barrett at 12. He is also the vice-captain alongside Savea for this match. And number 13, Billy Proctor. They are going to be put under pressure out there on the field. Jordie Barrett, maybe a little bit of PTSD up against the Springbok side, or should I say PSDT, meaning Peter Steph. The toy, that man just seems to have something against Jordie Barrett. Anytime Barrett gets near that ball, Peter Steph is trying to absolutely smash him. But for Barrett, his crash ball will be important in this game. But not just that, also feeding the backline. Last game, there were a few moments that maybe one more pass could have made a big difference. But he's got that long boot. Might be important in this type of game if New Zealand do decide to engage in the kicking battle. But overall, it is the combination they've gone with up till this point, so they probably weren't going to make any big switches for this game. At Eden Park, out on the left wing, no change from what we've been seeing recently. Rieko Ioane gets himself another chance. He will have his hands full because the Springboks have made a switch on the wings. They've decided to put Cheslin Colby in front of Rieko Ioane. That aerial battle, if Ioane is not careful, could be extremely one-sided in favour of the South African. But Ioane, he's still got that pace, and if he can just keep his hands on that ball rather than fumbling it, could be a dangerous man out there on the field. Number 14, this is where we do see Amoni Narawa make his way into the All Blacks lineup. Now, initially, Sevu Reece did look like the likely choice out on that right wing side, but Narawa, he's great defensively. He's got some pretty decent aerial ability, which will be important as he's up against Kanan Moody, who normally does tower over most of the men in front of him. But Narawa, he will be more than up for this challenge. He's been waiting for opportunities, hasn't had a huge amount of them, just the last game up against the French. So he will be there this week. As 14, number 15, Will Jordan. He had a bit of a rough game up against the Argentines in test match number 2, but he seems to do well in games up against the box. He's got some real ability of finding a gap, definitely with those straightening runs, which I do think New Zealand need to utilise in this matchup. But overall, a pretty strong looking All Blacks side compared with the amount of injuries that they've had in recent times. Just a really quick rattle off the bench: Taukei'aho, Williams and Lomax. They will be the front row replacements. Lomax returning from his recent injury. Fabian Holland at 19. Big surprise that they didn't decide to start him, but I do feel later on in a game he will certainly be able to bring that impact. Duplessis Karefi hoping to do the same in the number 20 jersey all throughout that man's All Blacks career, and it is a pretty short-lived career at this point. The words that keep on being said: he's not big enough to play up against the box. So I want to see Karefi make his way off that bench, bring a huge impact, get some turnovers in the breakdown, try and prove those people wrong, because there is no bigger game than a clash at Eden Park. Number 21, Kyle Preston, he will get his debut. Not sure how many minutes they'll be looking to use him as of yet. Quintupai, number 22, and then Damian McKenzie yet again slots in as the number 23. But that is the All Blacks starting lineup. Rassie Erasmus announcing his side around 6 p.m. New Zealand time, and he too has made a few changes compared to what we saw in the second match up against the Australians. We see some veterans returning. We see a couple injury surprises in this lineup, but jumping straight into the front row, it is Oxenshare, Malcolm Marx and Thomas du Toit slotting in as the three. I don't think there's a huge amount of surprise there. Ox was always going to be starting up against the All Blacks. He's going head-to-head at scrum time with Fletcher Null. So if you are someone who absolutely loves a scrum, that scrum battle is going to be like watching two heavyweight boxers go blow for blow. And these scrums could determine the game. Got to remember, if either side can get that dominance, advantages, penalties, slotting over threes, who's it going to be that does get it right? In this contest, Malcolm Marx in that number 2 jersey. Now, interestingly enough, they didn't go with Manus van der Merwe as the replacement hooker. Instead, it will be Jan-Hendrik Wessels, who can cover prop as well as hooker, but it's just an intriguing choice. Normally, you want that specialist hooker just in case anything went wrong, but all I'm going to say is I really hope Malcolm Marx doesn't pick up any sort of early injury, because if he does, the lineout of South Africa has already been a little bit lower in percentage than we are used to seeing, but chucking a guy in there that isn't even a specialist hooker could be really tough for the South African side. But Thomas du Toit, he had a great steal in the breakdown last game up against the Australians. He also brings a lot of physicality going head-to-head with the group. In this game, in the locking duo, it is Eben Etzebeth and Ruan Nokia, actually a combination that we saw last year in the Rugby Championship. Nokia has been playing out of his skin for quite some time. Eben Etzebeth, he is the most capped Springbok of all time. So, of course, if there's an opportunity to play a game up against the All Blacks at Eden Park, be one of the first names added to the team sheet. In the loose forward trio, Marco van Staden keeps his spot as the number 6. Some great work in the breakdowns. I mentioned about those penalties conceded up against the Australians last match. Had 3 in total. So if he can limit a couple of those, can be extremely crucial. In this game, Pieter-Steph du Toit returns from his concussion. He is in the number 7 jersey. And then number 8, the surprise of this forward pack, Seo Kolisi. It was said that he would be unable to play up against New Zealand. Now, the interesting part is no captaincy for Seo Kolisi here. And that does make me wonder just a little bit whether he's not 100%. You know, maybe there's some sort of injury still there that he is dealing with, and they didn't want to chuck the captaincy on him too, just in case Kwagga Smith has to make his way onto the field a bit earlier than anticipated. In the 9-10 combination, I believe it is the strongest duo that the Springboks can go with. Grant Williams, number 9, and Andre Pollard slotting in as the 10. Pollard's kicking is immense, not just off the goal-kicking tee, which is going to be extremely crucial in this game, but also just in general, those up and unders, contestable kicks. The Springboks were using it extremely effectively up against the Wallabies, and I do think we're going to see a lot more of that for this matchup up against New Zealand. As well, out on the wings, Kane Moody on the left, Cheslin Colby out on the right. Like I mentioned, a bit of a reshuffle, and I believe that is just to balance out what New Zealand have gone with there. Damien Dealende and Jesse Creel in the midfield, with the captaincy going the way of Creel, Andre Pollard, Cheslin Colby, Damien Dealende. Those 3 experienced heads made all the difference in the second game up against the Australians, and the fact that all three of them are still in the side alongside this man at number 15, Villy Larue, adding 100 extra caps into the equation. This is a hugely experienced Springbok side. Across this back line, with the exception of no Makazole Mapimpi and also no Faf de Klerk for this match. I will be honest, Faf de Klerk not appearing across the 23. It's quite a surprise. I thought maybe a bench spot could have been the least that he had, but instead, that is where Kobus Reinach does get the chance quickly off the bench. The 5-3 split for the South Africans. Jan-Hendrik Wessels, like I mentioned, at 16. Boyan Venter and Wilco Low. Lot of power up front later on. Ludiaga at number 19. He has been in sensational form, so hopefully gets a few minutes throughout this contest. No Franco Mostert, no Arge Snyman. Some thought the 6-2 was on the cards, in which case one of those two men would have got themselves the chance, but instead going with the extra back, Quagga Smith as the 20. He can play all three positions for the Boks. In fact, he can play more than the three. The man is extremely versatile. 21, Kobus Reinach. 22, Sasha Feinberg, Ngume Zulu. So no Mani Libok for this Eden Park test. And number 23, this is where we see Ethan Hooker. Now, there's been a little bit of a mixed opinion about this selection. Ethan Hooker was initially going to be playing up against the Australians in the second test match. Rassie changed his mind due to the loss in test match number 1. The big question is, who is Ethan Hooker covering in this game? You'd have to assume it's the midfield combo as well as the wings, because Sasha would have 10 and 15 covered, as well as a little bit in that centre duo if it was really needed. But I've seen people saying, why not go for that 6-2 split, or perhaps have someone like an Andre Esterhuizen as that 23, seeing as he offers you the centre cover as well as in that loose forward trio if it is really needed. But it's going to be intriguing. How many minutes will Ethan Hooker get here up against the All Blacks for this match? But those are the two starting sides. Looking through quickly at a few key players for the teams. First of all, in the All Blacks, Ardie Savia, first name that comes to mind, 100th match for that man. He's also leading in quite a few stats when it comes to forwards across the Rugby Championship. Been busy in the first two matches. You just know that this game would mean the absolute world to him if they can walk away with a victory. Now, Cody Taylor brought up his 100 caps up against the Argentines in the last match, and he became the first All Black to lose their Centurion match. Ardie Savia, just 2 weeks later, could become the second, unless the All Blacks have a very strong game here. I'll be honest, my next key player splits opinions, but it's Beauden Barrett. This is the type of game where Beauden Barrett will either have a lackluster type of performance or an absolutely world-class one. Now, he's played up against South Africa many times, and these are the type of games where we normally see Barrett try and step up to that next level. Now, of course, he should be trying to do that every single game, but for some reason, just get that little bit of a feeling at Eden Park, home field advantage for Barrett. Just feel like he's going to do something pretty big here. He's up against Andre Pollard, and he's got the attacking advantage when it comes to that department. Andre Pollard, 100%, has the kicking tee advantage. Barrett was a little bit shaky off the tee in the last game, but I would not be one bit surprised if he sets up a try or two in this matchup. And the last key for the All Blacks, I am going to go with Will Jordan, mainly because we saw in the last game up against the Argentines, that was far from Will Jordan's best. He wasn't strong under the high ball, whereas in this game, if he struggles under the high ball, the All Blacks, they will struggle in general. I wouldn't be surprised if we see multiple kicks in the air from South Africa for this game. So for the All Blacks to do well, they need Will Jordan covering that space, getting up for the high ball, and just counter-attacking with Beauden Barrett. That is where the All Blacks are their most dangerous, when they've got the Springboks a little bit scrambled in defence, and when they can pierce through those gaps and create opportunities. But for South Africa, key players, Cheslin Colby, first on the list. If Andre Pollard is putting up and unders, as well as Grant Williams, we will see a huge amount of Cheslin Colby. And at this test match, we saw it in the second game up against Australia. He was winning the aerial battle, even though he does not win the aerial battle when it comes to height. Anytime he goes head-to-head with taller opposition, he just makes them look ordinary. And in this game, he's up against Rieko Ioane, who honestly needs a game-changing type of performance here to even be considered in that number 11 jersey ahead of Caleb Clark. Next man to watch out for, I think, has to be Pieter-Steph du Toit. Similar to what I said about Beauden Barrett, when Pieter-Steph goes out there and he sees the All Blacks in front of him, he just seems to find that next gear. Something in the brain switches and he just goes into absolute beast mode, whether it's making massive shots on this All Black side or just in general play, the rucks, the lineouts. The last game we saw Pieter-Steph, he spent a lot of time out on the wing. I don't see them doing that again. I think that they'll want him right in the action, and that's what we'll see at Eden Park. And the last man of the South African side to keep an eye out for, see, Handré Pollard's just the easy answer, but I'm going to go Handré Pollard, the kicking game. So many times recently we have seen New Zealand versus South Africa split by less than 7 points. If Handré Pollard's kicking 100% and the All Blacks are only kicking 65 to 70, it could end up being the difference between these two sides. Multiple times they have actually been separated by just the 2 points, so that one extra penalty that Pollard can offer you could be absolutely crucial here. Now moving on to some interesting information about the head-to-head. Now South Africa have had an incredibly impressive record up against New Zealand as of late. They have won 6 of their last 9, and it would have to go close to one of the best runs that they've had up against New Zealand ever. They have won the last 4 matches up against the All Blacks as well, so looking to make it a historic 5 in a row here. But I did some research, and this is quite an intriguing one. Now, before I go into a few of these results, I just want to quickly say, by looking through at these, this is by no means taking away from the accolades that South Africa have created up against New Zealand in recent times, but there is actually a little bit of an intriguing common denominator here that we will have to talk about when looking at these results. So, of those last 4 games that South Africa have beaten New Zealand, none of them have been played on New Zealand soil. There were the 2 in South Africa last year, 18 points to 12 in favour of South Africa at Cape Town Stadium, and then the week prior, South Africa beating New Zealand 31 points to 27 that game at Ellis Park. The match before that, it was the Rugby World Cup final in France, 12 points to 11 in favour of the South Africans. That game extremely close, edge of the seat, nail-biting stuff. At the end of that game, the Springboks became back-to-back world champs. The game prior to that was at Twickenham, and South Africa able to beat New Zealand by a record margin, 35 points to 7. So 4 wins in a row, but none of them in New Zealand. In fact, of those 9 games that I'm mentioning here, only one of them was actually in New Zealand. There were the 2 in South Africa, like I said, the 1 in France, the 1 in England. We did see a match in 2023 take place at Mount Smart Stadium in Auckland. New Zealand were able to win it 35 points to 20. The year prior to that, 2 games in South Africa, 1 at Ellis Park and 1 at Mbombela Stadium. Now those games, 1-1, New Zealand winning the second, South Africa winning the first, and then the 2 games prior to that where the teams also went 1-1, they were taking place on the Gold Coast and Townsville. Of course, that was during that pandemic era of rugby. So just once in the last 9 have the New Zealanders had the home field advantage per se, whereas South Africa, they have had that home field advantage 4 of the times. But I do have a few other stats. Of course, it's been a busy week with plenty to look at. The last time South Africa were able to beat New Zealand in New Zealand, it was actually back 15th of September 2018. They did beat New Zealand at Sky Stadium in Wellington, 36 points to 34. Now, once again, that 2-point margin, something that is extremely common when these two sides play. And a bit of a fun fact about that game, Malcolm Marx and Cheslin Colby both scored themselves tries for that fixture. They also had a draw up against New Zealand on the 27th of July 2019. That was 16-16, also taking place at Sky Stadium as well. But the last time South Africa beat New Zealand at Eden Park was 1937. So around 88 years since that has happened. And also it has been a long 31 years since New Zealand have lost in general at Eden Park. Now, they've had a couple draws along the way, but I have to say, if there was going to be any side to break that streak, it could be the Springboks team. I know that some people don't like to hear that, but they are world champs twice in a row for a reason. They have won a lot of very close games Even that World Cup is the perfect example. 1-point victories in all 3 of their games of finals rugby. But every time when that whistle was blown, South Africa were that 1 point ahead of their opposition. So the question is, can they do it at Eden Park? Can they win this game by the thinnest of margins? Can they end that illustrious streak? I think now is the perfect time to do the score prediction for this contest. Now, I will be honest, this game has made me chop and change score predictions about 50 times. And that was before the teams were even announced. These two sides, such a long, storied rivalry, where games can be 50-50. At the moment, New Zealand are considered favourites, but I honestly see this game as one that the odds should be identical with each other because it is a flip of the coin kind of contest. Who goes out there and proves that they want it just that little bit more than the opposition? South Africa, 7 years since winning on New Zealand soil. But if Australia, this Rugby Championship has taught us anything, same with Argentina. Upsets can happen and they can create history. I actually think we're in for a really close game here between the two teams. And, you know, I don't want to get deported. I honestly think it's going to be 23-22 as the score. But I have no idea out of those two teams who will be leading at the end of that 80 minutes. 23-22 I'm happy with. That's somewhere close to what the score could look like if both sides play the way that I think they might. Now, there is a chance it's even higher scoring than that if we see both sides scoring tries for fun. Or maybe it's even lower scoring, like that Rugby World Cup final. I'm going to go 23-22 in favour of New Zealand, but extremely hesitantly. Because I do think the South African side, if they get it right, they're going to be very tough to beat. If New Zealand can gel, that's the biggest thing. And I do actually feel like this series is going to be 1-1. 1 win for New Zealand, 1 for South Africa. And perhaps this is the game that the New Zealanders do find their rhythm. They've gone with a lot of grunt up front in terms of Wallace Atiti, Simon Parker, Tupove. They're going to look to play a quick game in the breakdown, try and run South Africa off their feet. It's going to be tough to do, but maybe because it's at Eden Park, that is what could drive New Zealand to that next level. But I've also decided, because I'm terrible at predictions, as you guys know, I'm willing to do a forfeit. Now, with how I've rambled in this video, perhaps a lot of people have already tuned out, in which case this forfeit may go under the radar. But if South Africa win not just the Eden Park Test match, but also at Sky Stadium too, winning both matches in New Zealand, I will get a buzz cut. We have done forfeits before where I got left with a mustache for a week or so, but for this one, it would last a little bit longer. The hairline's not quite what it used to be, so it could be a pretty brutal look until it grows back, but if South Africa can do it twice, the hair comes off just like the wheels would for Razor's side. But thank you all very much for tuning in. Of course, let me know your score predictions in the comments down below. We are going to be doing the live commentary for the match as well as a live preview Friday night New Zealand time 7:05. Then also one at 3 a.m. New Zealand time on Saturday morning, but that is 5 p.m. for you guys in South Africa. So be sure to tune into those. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And I will see you all for the next one.